Victor Hale opened the door to his own office and held it, which was unusual. He never held doors. Marcus Webb noticed that before he noticed the HR representative already seated inside, before he noticed the manila folder on the desk, before he noticed that his colleague Janet Cho had stopped typing 3 workstations over and was watching through the glass. "Sit down, Marcus." He sat. Victor set the folder between them without opening it. There was a processing discrepancy on the Delacroix file. A residential loan, $412,000, misdirected to the wrong escrow account. Your initials are on the authorization. Marcus looked at the folder. He knew the Delacroix file. He had flagged an irregularity in that file 6 weeks ago, sent it to Victor's desk with a written memo. The correction had never come back. "I flagged that file. I sent you a memo." "I don't have a memo. I have a copy." Victor glanced at the HR representative, then back at Marcus. "The authorization carries your initials. That's what the audit shows." He slid an envelope across the desk. "We're letting you go, effective immediately. Security will stay with you while you clear your things. Final check arrives Friday." The HR representative folded her hands and studied the edge of the table. Marcus didn't move for a moment. He thought about the mortgage payment due in 11 days. He thought about Cora, waiting in the lobby downstairs with her library book, and the half-eaten granola bar she'd put in her jacket pocket that morning. He stood. "I'd like a copy of the audit documentation. That can be requested through HR," Victor said, and had already looked away. If you already feel it, that tightening in your chest, hit the like button and subscribe to Hidden Ledger. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from, because this story is just getting started, and the part they don't see coming, keep watching. Security walked Marcus to his workstation. Janet Cho had gone back to typing. Nobody else on the floor looked up. He took 12 minutes to clear a desk he had worked at for 4 years, placing a framed photo of Cora, a coffee mug, a phone charger, and 2 legal pads into the cardboard box the security guard had already set out. He paused with the photo in his hand. Someone had decided that box needed to be ready before the meeting started. He understood what that meant. Cora was on the lobby bench where he'd left her, the library book open on her lap but not read, watching him come through the glass doors with the box. She was 9 years old and had been reading his face since she was 3, which was when her mother left and the two of them became each other's only constant. "Did something happen? Let's get to the car." "Dad." He looked at her directly. "Yeah, something happened. I'll explain on the way." She closed her book and walked beside him through the lobby doors into the October rain, without asking anything else. Marcus Webb had worked at Hargrove Financial Services for 4 years and 2 months. He was a loan processing specialist. The formal title was Senior Document Analyst, which meant he reviewed, authorized, and tracked the paperwork behind residential mortgage transactions. Escrow reconciliation, title documentation, loan servicing records. The work was detailed and largely invisible, the kind nobody noticed until something went wrong. He was very good at it. He had a habit, bordering on instinct, of reading files twice when the numbers felt off, an amount that didn't match a preceding document, a date sequence that moved in the wrong direction, a signature block that appeared 1 page too late in the chain. His former manager, Patricia Solis, who had retired 2 years before, had written in his last performance review under her supervision. Marcus has an unusual ability to locate discrepancies that originate upstream. He finds what should have been caught before the file reached him. Patricia had gone. Victor Hale had come from the Dallas branch 8 months ago. Marcus raised Cora alone. Her mother had left when Cora was 3 and had been sporadic in contact since, which Marcus had stopped explaining and started simply managing. Their life had a structure. The house on Larimer Street with its narrow porch and fig tree in the backyard. The school Cora loved because it had a science room with real microscopes. The mornings built the same way each day. Up at 6, her breakfast made, lunch packed, in the car by 7:20. The house on Larimer Street was owned in the way that houses get owned when a mortgage company holds the larger portion of it. The mortgage was serviced through Hargrove Financial Services, which he had noted when he accepted the job and had not thought about since. The connection would matter later. He was 11 days from a payment he could no longer make. He hadn't told Cora any of it. He had told her instead that the fig tree needed another season before its branches were strong enough to climb, that she should finish the book about the girl who sailed across the Atlantic, because it was exactly the kind of book worth finishing. They drove home from the office through the rain, with the radio off and the wipers working at full speed. Cora sat with the library book on her lap, her eyes on the windshield, not reading. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. It was not a question. "No. Then they'll figure that out." He glanced over. "It might take some time." "I know." She turned a page she hadn't read. "I'm not worried." He didn't answer. He wanted to believe her, the way he always wanted to believe her, because she said certain things with a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere older than 9 years old. He was 3 blocks from their house when he saw the woman at the bus stop. She was standing at the outer edge of the shelter, the kind the city had installed in the 90s and had since stopped maintaining. 2 of its side panels gone, and the rain was coming in sideways, which made the remaining glass more decorative than useful. She was perhaps 70, perhaps older, small in a tan overcoat that had been fine quality once and was soaked through at the shoulders. She held a canvas bag over one arm. She was not looking at her phone. She was looking at the rain with the patience of someone who had decided that looking at it differently would not change it. Marcus pulled over. "What are you doing?" Cora asked. "She'll be out there 40 minutes if the 44 is running late. It always runs late in the rain." He rolled down the passenger window. The woman turned at the sound. Her face was composed, the kind of face that had spent years deciding to lead with calm rather than with reaction. "Ma'am, the 44 runs about every 40 minutes when it rains. Can we take you somewhere?" She looked at him, then at Cora, who gave a small wave from the passenger seat. "I'm going to Alderton," the woman said. "East Side. That's 5 minutes from here. Please get in." She considered this for a beat. Not hesitation exactly, Marcus thought, but the deliberate pause of someone who evaluated offers before accepting them. Then she opened the rear door and settled in with the canvas bag on the seat beside her. "Eleanor," she said, as he pulled back onto the street. "Marcus. And that's Cora." "Hello, Cora." "Hi. You can borrow my book if you want. I've read it twice." Eleanor looked at the cover. "I read this when it came out. The actual voyage took her 27 days. Cora turned around in her seat. "How do you know that?" She wrote an account afterward. The 3rd week was the hardest. The wind shifted, and she had to recalculate the route entirely. Cora looked at her father with the expression she reserved for people she had decided were worth knowing. The heater was going and the rain hit the roof in a steady drum. The back of the car smelled like wet leaves, and the cardboard box in the trunk. Marcus drove carefully, both hands on the wheel, the way he always drove with Cora in the car. "Difficult day?" Eleanor asked. He almost left it unanswered. "I was let go from my job earlier today." "What kind of work?" "Mortgage processing. Loan servicing documentation." "And the reason they gave?" He registered the phrasing, not what happened or what did they say, but the reason they gave, which placed the stated reason and the real one in 2 separate categories without making a point of it. "A processing error on a file I had already flagged 6 weeks ago. My initials were on the authorization. I have a memo showing I escalated the problem before the error was ever logged." "They say they don't have the memo." Eleanor looked out her window. The rain moved across the intersection in gray sheets. "How long were you there?" 4 years and 2 months. She was quiet. He turned right on Alderton, and she said the second house on the left, the one with the porch light on. He pulled to the curb in front of a house that was not large and not small, with a wooden porch and a garden put to bed for the season. A black town car sat at the curb ahead of them. The driver was already out with an umbrella, moving toward the rear door of the town car with the efficiency of someone paid to anticipate one person's needs and nothing else. Marcus looked at the logo on the rear door panel of the town car. Hargrove Capital Holdings. The parent company. The full name, not the branch branding. He looked at it for 1 second. Eleanor gathered her canvas bag. "Thank you for the ride." She paused with her hand on the door. "The memo. You said you have a copy." "In email. And I printed one when I sent it." She held his gaze for a moment. "Keep both. People who flag problems before they cost the company money are not easy to replace. Sometimes the people above them don't understand that until they find out how much it costs to look for a replacement." She opened the door and got out. The driver covered her with the umbrella. She looked back once. "Good evening, Marcus." "Good evening, Cora." The porch door closed. The driver returned to the car. Cora watched through the rear window until the porch light was all that remained. "She was interesting," she said. "Yeah, that was a Hargrove Capital logo on the car." He sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. "Yeah," he said. "It was. He pulled out and drove the 3 blocks home. That evening he made pasta because he could make it without thinking, and Cora ate across from him and asked if she could call her grandmother. And he said yes, and he listened to her from the next room telling her grandmother that her dad had lost his job but that he was going to sort it out, and that there was a woman in the car tonight who knew the real facts about the Atlantic sailing book. After Cora went to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and the physical copy of the memo he kept in his home files. September 3rd, addressed to Victor Hale and the compliance team. It described, with the specificity of someone who had read the Delacroix file 3 times before writing a word, a discrepancy in the escrow account that had not originated from his processing step, but from a template error in the documentation package Victor's office had distributed to the floor. His initials appeared on the authorization at a later stage, in what an audit would call normal processing flow. But the sequence was wrong. The dates were wrong. The memo predated the alleged error by 15 days. If someone read the original date stamps, really read them, the whole story was already there. He emailed his employment attorney, Carol Reyes, a copy that night and asked her to review it. He had used Carol on a contract dispute at his previous company and kept her on a flat monthly retainer. He told her what had happened in 1 paragraph. He did not editorialize. He lay in bed and calculated the mortgage payment in 11 days, the school activity fees, the gas bill, his car insurance. He had $847 in checking. The mortgage was $1,640. The fig tree outside his window moved in the rain, patient with the season. The pre-default notification from the mortgage servicer was in the mail pile on the kitchen counter the next morning. He recognized the letterhead before he finished unfolding it. Hargrove Financial Services. His own address appeared in the servicer's block text, formal and impersonal. The outstanding balance was $6,124. If it was not received within 30 calendar days, the account would be referred to the Default Resolution Department at Hargrove Capital Holdings. He read the letter twice. He set it on the table beside the printed memo. He looked at both pieces of paper, one saying he owed the company $6,124, one showing he had tried to protect the company from a $412,000 error. He called Carol Reyes. "The date stamps are strong," she said, after reading the memo. "Tell me about the manager." Victor Hale, 8 months at the branch. He came from the Dallas operation. "I'd heard there were compliance issues at Dallas before he transferred. I'll look into it. Was there anyone else at the branch who saw you send the memo? Anyone in the communication chain?" He thought about Janet Cho, who worked 3 rows over, who had asked him 2 weeks after he sent the memo whether Victor had ever responded, who had said nothing and gone back to typing when security walked him out with the box. There might be someone. He texted Janet that afternoon. "I know this is a hard position, but if you remember anything about the September 3rd memo on the Delacroix file, I'd appreciate knowing." Her reply came 47 minutes later. "I can't say anything officially, but I saw the memo come back from Victor's assistant with a post-it on it. Handwritten. It said handle at year-end review. I thought you and Victor had worked it out. I didn't know what happened. I'm sorry, Marcus." He forwarded the text to Carol without comment. He did not hear from Eleanor Marsh. He had driven a stranger home in the rain. She had given him sound advice in the car and gone inside her house, and that was the shape of it, and he had no reason to expect anything further. He was wrong about that. If this story found its way to you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Hidden Ledger posts new stories every week, and the one after this one is already waiting. Your support is what keeps the ledger open. What Marcus had no reason to know, what no one at his level at Hargrove Financial Services knew or would have thought to research, was who Eleanor Marsh actually was. Eleanor Marsh had built Hargrove Capital Holdings herself. Starting in 1987, with $40,000 in personal savings and a leased office on the 3rd floor of a building that no longer stood, she had run the first desk, written the first compliance manual through 3 drafts over 2 years, because she believed that mortgage work ran on trust, and that trust required documentation legible to anyone who picked it up. She grew the company from a regional brokerage into a financial services holding group with subsidiaries across 14 states. Origination, escrow services, loan servicing, property holdings. She sat as chair of the board. She held 61% of the outstanding shares. When she signed something, It became a direction. When she didn't, it remained a proposal. She was 73 years old. She rode the bus because she had decided that comfort and efficiency were not the same thing, and also because she found that people said more interesting things when they didn't know who she was. She carried a canvas bag because her assistant, Dory, was always offering to carry things for her, and she had no interest in being carried. She wore the tan overcoat because it had been Gerald's favorite coat on her, and Gerald had been gone for 6 years, and she was not in the habit of letting go of things simply because time suggested she should. She had been in a board meeting on the day Marcus drove her home, 4 hours reviewing subsidiary performance figures across the holding group, and her phone had died in the 3rd hour. When the session ended, she declined the offered car. 5 miles. The bus would do. She stood at the stop on Meridian and Larimer and thought, as she often thought on bus stops, about which problems in the organization were structural and which were personnel failures, and which were both at once. She had been thinking specifically about the Meridian Street branch of Hargrove Financial Services, which had generated an elevated volume of internal dispute flags over the 2 previous quarters. The branch manager was Victor Hale, who had transferred from the Dallas operation, where a regulatory inquiry had touched documentation practices without fully resolving them. She had requested a compliance review 3 months prior. A final report had not come back. She was standing in the rain thinking about documentation irregularities when a 10-year-old Toyota pulled over. She got in and listened. Marcus described, without knowing who she was or what she had been thinking about, precisely the structure of the irregularity the compliance review had been designed to catch. A flagging memo. A failure to respond. An authorization carrying his initials after the fact. He described the sequence, the date problem, the shape of it, in the careful and specific language of someone who had read the relevant files multiple times and was not afraid of what they showed. She did not tell him who she was. The situation needed to stay clear a little longer, but she told him to keep the memo, both copies, because she knew what happened when people didn't, and she told him why in language she hoped was direct enough to act on. When he pulled up to her house and the Hargrove Capital Town car was at the curb, she watched to see if he noticed the logo. He looked at it for exactly 1 second. She saw the look. She went inside. The next morning she called Dory at 7:15. I need the full compliance file on the Meridian Street branch. The employment file on Marcus Webb, loan processing, termination dated 2 days ago, and the Delacroix escrow audit trail. Not the summary, the full documentation chain. Dory had worked for Eleanor for 11 years. By 10:30 Eleanor had located the September 3rd memo in the compliance archive. The original scanned copy, date stamp intact, filed under a subject header that would not surface in a standard compliance search. The physical document, per a note in the system, had been received by Victor Hale's assistant and returned with a handwritten notation, handle at year-end review, dated September 5th. The Delacroix audit had been escalated on September 18th, with Marcus Webb's initials on the authorization. The September 3rd memo was referenced nowhere in the audit report. She read it all twice. Then she called Roger Kwan, her head of compliance, and told him the review was no longer preliminary. She called outside counsel. She asked Dory to have the town car ready at 8 the next morning. One more call to make. Marcus was at the kitchen table with the pre-default letter and a cup of coffee that had gone cold when his phone rang. Marcus Webb, a woman's voice, precise and unhurried. Yes, my name is Dory Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Eleanor Marsh. Miss Marsh is chair of the board at Hargrove Capital Holdings. She'd like you to come to the Meridian Street office tomorrow morning at 9. She'll have someone meet you in the lobby. He set the coffee cup down carefully. I'm sorry, did you say Eleanor Marsh? Yes, please bring your copy of the September 3rd memo and any other documentation related to your termination. Can you be there at 9? He looked at the pre-default letter sitting beside the printed memo on his kitchen table. Hargrove Capital Holdings, both of them, on the same table. Yes, he said. I'll be there. He called Carol Reyes and said 3 words. Be there too. The lobby of the Meridian Street office was unchanged. The security desk, the elevator bank, the full Hargrove Capital Holdings name on the wall behind reception, the parent company name, not the branch branding. Dory Chen was waiting for him at the desk and walked him to the elevator without preamble, which he appreciated. The conference room on the 4th floor was the room where Victor Hale had handed him an envelope 2 days ago. and told him security would stay with him while he cleared his desk. Marcus recognized the frosted glass wall, the window facing Meridian Street, the long table with its particular proportion of authority. Eleanor Marsh was sitting at the head of the table. She was in a gray blazer, reading something on a tablet, and she looked up when he came in with the same composed calm from the back seat of his car on a rainy Tuesday evening. And she said, "Good morning, Marcus. Sit down," and he sat. Roger Kwan was across from him, a careful, deliberate man Marcus had never met, who turned out to be Eleanor's head of compliance. A woman he also didn't recognize sat beside Roger. Outside counsel, Carol Reyes was already in the room, which she would tell him later had been arranged precisely as it was. Victor Hale was not in the room. Eleanor set the tablet face down. The September 3rd memo is in the compliance file. The original, with the date stamp intact, and the notation on the physical copy confirmed by a witness who saw it at the time. She looked at him directly. The audit trail on the Delacroix file places your initials on an authorization processed 15 days after the memo flagging the underlying error. The memo is not referenced anywhere in the audit report. She paused. "I need you to confirm, on the record, that the document in this file is the memo you sent, unaltered." She turned the tablet toward him. He read the first 2 paragraphs. He looked up. "That's it." "Yes. The sequence establishes what occurred." She said it the way someone states the outdoor temperature. Not with drama, not unkindly, simply accurately. "Victor Hale is no longer with the company. That was completed before you came in this morning. The formal documentation goes to the State Regulatory Board, because the Dallas file and this one together constitute a reportable pattern." Roger Kwan made a note. The outside counsel wrote something. "Your termination is rescinded," Eleanor said. "You receive full back pay from the termination date. Your employment record is corrected. If you'd like to return to this branch, your position is open. If you'd prefer a transfer or a negotiated settlement, those options are on the table. Carol has the figures." Carol gave him a single nod across the table. "They're fair." He looked at Eleanor. He said the word steadily. "The mortgage." Eleanor held his gaze. "The outstanding balance has been cleared against an error credit. The account is current. The pre-default notice is withdrawn." "A beat. You fell behind because a manager used your termination to cover his own processing error. The account reflects that." The room was very still. Marcus looked through the frosted glass at the main floor. He could see the shapes of people at their desks. 3 rows back, he could see what he thought was Janet Cho's workstation. "You knew," he said, in the car. "I suspected. I needed to see the file before I could say anything useful or honest. Why didn't you say who you were?" She considered it the way she considered things that deserved a real answer. "Because the situation needed to remain clear before it became a conversation about something other than the facts. And because you drove me home without asking for anything." "That was enough?" "It was evidence," Eleanor said, "of what kind of person I was dealing with. I've run this company for 36 years. I know the difference between someone who acts with decency because they think someone's watching and someone who does it in the rain on a Tuesday evening with a box of desk contents in the trunk and a child in the front seat. The ledger counts both. It values the second one more." Carol Reyes looked at the table. Roger Kwan wrote something and did not look up. On the main floor, through the frosted glass, Janet Cho had stopped typing. She was watching the conference room. She had been at her desk when security walked Marcus out with the cardboard box 2 days ago, and she had said nothing because she hadn't known the full shape of it then. She knew the shape of it now. She made herself keep looking through the glass at the room where the chair had been set right, and she held that image, and she carried it forward from that day. What followed was proportional and public, which is how reckoning works at Hidden Ledger. Victor Hale's termination was formally documented and submitted to the regulatory board. The Dallas file and the Meridian Street file, read together by compliance reviewers who now had cause to look carefully, described a pattern that the board's committee would examine for 4 months. Victor's name was removed from the branch's records. The HR representative who had attended the termination kept her position. She had followed procedure as she understood it, and procedure had been the problem, not her. But she worked under a revised compliance protocol for the next 2 years. One that required independent documentation review before any termination tied to a pending audit could be finalized. Marcus came back to his desk on a Thursday. He didn't make an announcement. He set his things in the same places they'd always been: the photo of Cora at the corner, the coffee mug, and pulled up the file queue that had accumulated while the branch ran short-staffed. His mug was already where it should be. Someone had placed it back. He didn't ask who. Janet Cho came over at 11 with a folder. "There's a discrepancy in the Holloway escrow file. I wasn't sure who to send it to." He looked at the folder. "Leave it. I'll take it." She nodded and went back to her desk. That was the whole of it between them, and it was enough. Eleanor did not publicize any part of what had occurred. She raised it once, at a board meeting, as context for a motion to restructure the compliance review process across all branches. She described the situation without names: a processing specialist who had flagged an error, a manager who had filed the flag incorrectly, an audit that had not looked for what was already there. The motion passed. The new protocol required that any termination connected to a pending audit receive independent review before it was finalized. She called Marcus once more, 3 weeks later. She asked one question: had Cora gone back to the library? He said yes. She'd gotten the sequel to the Atlantic sailing book. Eleanor said the second one was better. Then she said, "When I told you in the car that people who flag problems aren't easily replaced, I wasn't offering comfort. I was stating a documented fact." "I know that now," Marcus said. "Good." She hung up. He sat at his desk with the phone in his hand, looking at nothing in particular. Then he set it down and opened the Holloway file. 4 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in February, Marcus sat on the narrow porch of the house on Larimer Street and read through a regional documentation process report the branch had asked him to contribute to. The fig tree in the backyard stood bare and patient, its branches holding the cold, waiting for the season to change. Cora had asked him that morning whether climbing season was getting close. She came out and sat beside him with the sequel under her arm. She'd finished it the night before. The second voyage took her 19 days, Cora said. 8 fewer than the first, because she knew which mistakes not to repeat. She wrote that exactly. She said the third week was the hardest the first time, so the second time, she planned for it specifically. Cora leaned back and looked at the February sky over Larimer Street. "Is that your work?" "Yeah." "Is it good work?" He looked at the pages in his hand. He thought about the memo he had written in September and kept a copy of, the one nobody was supposed to find, which had been there the entire time. He thought about a woman in a tan overcoat standing at a broken bus shelter in the rain, looking at weather the way someone looks at it when they have already decided it will not stop them. "Yeah," he said, "it is." Cora pulled her knees up to her chest. She was quiet for a moment in the way she got quiet when she was about to say something she'd thought through carefully. People who do the right thing when nobody's watching, they get found out eventually. She looked at the fig tree. Both ways. He looked at her. She was already opening the new book. She'd said what she meant and was done with it. "Both ways," she said again, to the winter light, to the bare branches, to the street she'd grown up on, and turned the first page. The ledger had been open the whole time. Marcus had made an entry in it without knowing. One act of decency offered to a stranger with a wet coat and a canvas bag and a face that led with calm. He had not offered the ride to be repaid. He had offered it because a woman was standing in the rain and he had room in the car and a daughter who had already decided to wave at her. The ledger doesn't ask your reasons. It only records what you did. He folded the report and put it in his jacket pocket and sat beside his daughter on the narrow porch, while the fig tree held its bare branches in the winter light, patient with the season, waiting for what came next. Thank you for staying until the balance was restored. The people who watch to the end are the ones who understand why the ledger matters. If this story stayed with you, the videos on your screen right now are ready to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, the ledger has your name. Hidden Ledger. Every account settles.